My stepmother called me a freeloader while I was working 3 jobs to keep a roof over my own damn head. Yeah. I was 19, dead on my feet, and barely keeping it together, juggling night shifts at a bar, mopping floors on weekends, and handing out samples in a grocery store aisle just to scrape together enough for college tuition. And still, she had the nerve to look me in the eye, over a dinner I cooked with groceries I bought in a house I cleaned, and say, "You just take and take. You're a leech, you know that." I remember standing there with a dirty dish in one hand, not sure whether to laugh or scream. She was sipping wine like she'd earned something, while I was holding my breath, praying my debit card wouldn't decline on ramen later that night. The worst part? My dad just sat there chewing slowly, pretending he didn't hear a damn word. That was the night I knew I had to leave, and when I did, I promised myself something. I'd never need anyone like her again. Before we start, type 1 if you've ever dreamed of getting revenge but never got the chance. No judgment here. And hit that subscribe button. We don't let betrayal slide around here, not even from people who don't subscribe. Let's continue. My name's Jenna Wallace and I'm 31 years old now. But back then, I was just a stubborn, exhausted 19-year-old girl trying to survive in a house that never felt like mine. I grew up in Cedar Falls, Iowa, raised by my dad, Tom Wallace, after my mom passed when I was 11. He was a good man in the sense that he didn't hit or yell, but he also didn't stand up for much. Especially not when it came to Lori, his new wife. Lori came into our lives like a Hallmark villain in pastel cardigans, smiling in public, icy behind closed doors. She married Dad when I was 16, and by 17, I already knew I was just a nuisance in her new life plan. She never hit me or screamed, she didn't have to. Her weapons were guilt, snide remarks, and silence at just the right moments. I stayed after high school, enrolled at the local community college to save money. Lori acted like I was camping in her guest room, not living in my own childhood home. Every time I opened the fridge or left the porch light on, she had something to say. And my dad, he'd just clear his throat and mumble something about not causing waves. So I stopped making waves. I drowned in them quietly. The breaking point came on a Thursday night. I had just come home from my 3rd shift that week, bartending until 2 a.m., feet blistered, clothes reeking of stale beer and fryer grease. I was so tired I could barely see straight. But Lori had this thing about everyone pulling their weight, so I stopped at the grocery store and picked up ingredients to cook dinner. Not for me, for the house, for her, for my dad. I made lemon chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, the works. We sat down to eat. Lori took one bite, sipped her Chardonnay, and without even looking up said, "It must be nice living here for free. Most people your age are out on their own by now." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. I thought I misheard her. "Excuse me." "You heard me," she said, her voice calm like she was reading off a grocery list. "This isn't a charity, Jenna. Maybe it's time you start pulling your own weight or find your own place." And my dad, he cleared his throat, eyes on his plate. Didn't say a damn word, that was it. The second I finished doing those dishes, I packed a bag. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just left. And I made myself a promise in that driveway. One day I'll be so far above this you won't even see me coming. 2 weeks after I moved out of my dad's house, I got a voicemail from him. It was short and awkward, the way all his calls were. "Hey Jenna, just wanted to check in. Lori says you left some things here. We're going to donate them if you don't come by this weekend." Donate them, my things. I had left behind a few boxes in the garage, old photo albums, some books, the quilt my mom made me before she passed. Things that weren't Lori's to give away. That quilt was the last thing I had of my mother that smelled like her. And they were going to drop it off at Goodwill like it was a used blender. I called back, trying to keep my voice even. "Tell Lori not to touch my stuff, I'll come get it." Dad hesitated. "Well, she already kind of boxed everything up, said you left in a hurry, didn't seem like you wanted it." That was the moment it hit me. I didn't just leave the house, I had been erased from it. When I showed up that Saturday, Lori didn't even come outside. Dad handed me the boxes like we were exchanging evidence in a crime scene. He said nothing. I opened one in the backseat of my car and found my mom's quilt shoved underneath a broken frame. One that used to hold a picture of the 3 of us from before Lori ever existed. And taped to the top of the box was a yellow sticky note in Lori's handwriting. "Best of luck out there, you'll need it." I stared at that note, heart pounding. She wanted me to fail, she needed me to fail. It was the only way her twisted little power trip made sense. So right then, I made myself a second promise, one colder than the first. I wasn't just going to survive, I was going to succeed in a way she couldn't ignore. And the next time she saw my name, it wouldn't be in a return address, it would be on a door she needed to walk through. Leaving Laurie's house felt like escaping a burning building. But no one tells you that freedom smells a lot like mildew and instant noodles when you're broke. My new life started in a dingy basement apartment in East Des Moines, next to a bowling alley and beneath a woman named Sheila, who tap-danced every Saturday morning like she was auditioning for Broadway. My landlord, Mr. Daly, was 72, wore orthopedic shoes and a cowboy hat, and insisted on calling me Miss Jenna, like I was a 1920s debutante instead of a broke college kid scraping by on peanut butter crackers. I had 3 jobs: bartending at Sammy's Tap Room, handing out freezer-burned pizza samples at Hendrick's Grocery, and cleaning classrooms at South Central Community College, where I was also somehow expected to pass calculus. I became an expert at folding laundry at 2 a.m., memorizing economics flashcards while cleaning gum off desks, and pretending I hadn't cried in the walk-in fridge 5 minutes before my shift started. One night after working a double at Sammy's, I stumbled home to find my electricity had been shut off. I'd forgotten to pay the bill again. I lit a candle and sat there on my bed, eating a cup of lukewarm noodles, trying not to think about the fact that Laurie was probably sitting in her air-conditioned kitchen, sipping wine, absolutely certain I was out here failing. And to be honest, I almost was. There were nights when I thought about giving up, quitting school, moving back, not to live with Laurie, hell no, but maybe just to pause for a minute. Sleep, breathe. I mentioned this once to Maya, my upstairs neighbor and part-time guardian angel who worked as a medical assistant during the day and brought me leftovers at night. Move back, she said, holding a spoonful of lentil curry in front of my mouth like a toddler. And let the pastel witch win. Pastel witch. She wears pink cardigans and feeds on the souls of broke stepdaughters. Jenna, no. You're not quitting. But I'm broke, Maya. She pointed her spoon at me. You're not broke, you're pre-rich, like a dragon who hasn't found her gold yet. I laughed. Maya was good at that, reminding me who I was when I started to forget. Still, things got rougher before they got better. I failed statistics, again. I started mixing up my class schedules with my work ones. Once I showed up at Hendrick's in a blazer instead of my apron, thinking I was headed to an interview. My boss, Carol, a woman who had survived 3 divorces and once threw a frozen turkey at a shoplifter, took one look at me and said, "You need to choose one breakdown at a time, honey." Thanks, Carol. Inspirational as always. She slapped a name tag on my chest and muttered, "You're lucky you're cute." My body was giving up, my brain was fried. And on top of everything else, my car, my beloved 2004 Toyota Corolla, affectionately named Ruth Bader Ginsburn, decided it was time to die. Right in the middle of a snowstorm, on a Tuesday, as I was driving to a midterm, I sat there in the freezing car, textbook in my lap, watching the snow pile up on the windshield, wondering if this was the part in the movie where the protagonist has her rock-bottom montage. I even looked up, half expecting the universe to send a sign. All I got was the sound of Ruth's engine wheezing like a dying goat. "Awesome," I muttered, hitting the steering wheel. "Really cinematic, God. Thanks." Eventually, I made it to class 30 minutes late, soaked to the knees, looking like a raccoon who'd been dragged through a river. My professor, Dr. Chan, looked up from his desk and just blinked. "Miss Wallace," he said calmly, "did you fall into a snowbank or fight one?" "Both." He didn't even ask for my excuse, just handed me a towel and said, "The world's already testing you." No need for me to pile on. I'll never forget that moment. Or him, he didn't know it, but he handed me something way more important than a towel that day. He gave me grace, and in those years, grace was rare. I started writing notes to myself on Post-its. Keep going. You don't need their permission. They don't have to believe in you, you already do. I stuck them on my mirror, my notebooks, even the bathroom stall at Sammy's. I needed to see those words like I needed sleep and caffeine, so I kept pushing. Through the exhaustion, the overdraft fees, the lonely nights where silence felt like a scream, and slowly things began to shift, but that part comes later. At this point in the story, I was still in the fire, still burning my fingers trying to build a life from ash. And somewhere, I imagined Laurie sipping her wine, telling her friends I'd probably come crawling back any day now. I smiled at that thought, not out of bitterness, but because I knew something she didn't. I might have been broke, bruised, and sleep-deprived, but I wasn't crawling. I was climbing, and I wasn't stopping. They say success doesn't come with a fanfare. It just walks in quietly one day and sits next to you like it's always been there. For me, It showed up in the form of a cheap blazer from the clearance rack at Marshall's and a university letterhead that said, "Congratulations, you've been accepted into our transfer program." I stared at that email for a full minute, blinking like it was written in another language. "Is this real?" I asked Maya, shoving my laptop toward her across the tiny dining table we shared with a toaster and an aggressive spider plant named Jeffrey. Maya read it, gasped, and screamed so loud Mr. Daly banged on the ceiling with his cane. "You're going to Des Moines University," she shouted. "Oh my God, Jenna, you're getting out." She was right, I was getting out. Not just out of the basement apartment or out of the endless loop of minimum wage jobs, but out of the version of my life where Lori still had her foot on my neck. I sold Ruth Bader Ginsburn for parts, rest in peace, sweet queen, packed my books, kissed Meyer on the forehead like she was my own blood, and got on a Greyhound with $212 in my account and a rolling suitcase with a broken wheel. The first week at university was like stepping into another planet. Kids were casually talking about study abroad programs and weekend ski trips. One girl had a dog that ate organic bison. Bison. I didn't even know bison came in dog food form. I felt like a fraud, older than most, broker than all, and wearing the same 3 sweaters on rotation like a cartoon character. But I kept my head down and treated my classes like a second job. I had been broke for years, being an outsider didn't scare me. Then one day in my health policy seminar, a guest speaker came in. Her name was Rebecca Tillman, an executive from a major insurance firm. Mid-40s, heels sharp enough to file paperwork with voice like honey over steel. She talked about the complexities of medical claims, ethics in decision-making, and how insurance wasn't just numbers, it was human stories. Something clicked. Afterward, I walked right up to her with shaking hands and said, "Hi, I'm Jenna. I want to do what you do, but I don't have connections, I don't have money, and I'm starting late. What I do have is grit and a GPA that nearly killed me to earn. Where do I begin?" She looked at me like she'd been waiting for someone to ask that. "Start by emailing me your resume," she said. "Then we'll talk." 3 months later, I was an intern at National Allied Health, her firm. It wasn't glamorous. I got coffee, filed documents. Once I accidentally faxed an entire stack of internship evaluations to the janitorial department. But I was learning, watching, listening, and slowly I started doing more. One afternoon, Rebecca called me into her office. "I heard you flagged a policy error on a claim that saved us 6 figures. You realize analysts don't usually catch that." "I used to work 3 jobs and still couldn't afford an eye exam," I said. "I notice numbers, it's a trauma response." She laughed. "Well, your trauma's about to get promoted." I walked out of that office feeling taller. Like every insult Lori ever tossed my way had somehow turned into armor. But the best moment came a few weeks later, during a networking mixer. I was standing near the snack table, because free food is still sacred, and overheard 2 senior execs talking about upcoming leadership tracks. One of them nodded toward me and said, "That's Jenna Wallace, sharp kid. I've got my eye on hers." That night I walked home and sat on the floor of my apartment, looking around at the modest furniture, the working lights, the quiet hum of a heater that didn't break every other week. I whispered, "You're doing it. You're really doing it." It wasn't a fairy tale, it wasn't a miracle. It was a slow, painful, stubborn climb, but the view from halfway up, it was already better than anything Lori could imagine. And deep down I knew this was just the beginning. Because for the first time in my life I wasn't running from something. I was running toward something, and I was gaining speed. Just when you think you've made it over the mountain, life gently reminds you that it's a whole damn mountain range. After landing my analyst position at National Allied Health, I moved into a small but sunlit apartment downtown, traded in my clearance rack blazer for a tailored one, still on sale because some habits die hard, and began to feel, dare I say it, stable. Not rich, not relaxed, but no longer bracing for disaster every time I checked my bank balance. Then came the merger. One Monday morning, we were summoned to the conference room by the senior VP, a man who smiled like someone forced him at gunpoint. He clicked through a soul-numbing slideshow and announced that National Allied would be merging with Omni-Well Insurance, one of the largest healthcare providers in the region. Everyone clapped. I did not. Because with mergers come layoffs, territory shifts, and chaos. And chaos is a thief of routines, of peace, of everything you finally thought you had a grip on. For 3 months, we lived in limbo. Systems changed overnight. We had to learn new software while still using the old one just in case. Department heads were suddenly gone. My mentor, Rebecca, who had been my guiding star, was reassigned to corporate strategy in Chicago. My new manager was Todd, mid-30s, full of confidence and absolutely no discernible qualifications. He once confused a colonoscopy claim with cosmetic surgery and told me, "It's all the same end of the body, right?" I nearly passed out from second-hand embarrassment. He also called me Jenny every single day, for 6 weeks. "It's Jenna," I corrected again, holding the printout he'd just signed with the wrong name. Right. "Sorry, Jennifer." Todd was the kind of man who believed Excel spreadsheets were too feminine. He gave out compliments like, "You're surprisingly organized for someone who drinks oat milk." Working under him was like being babysat by a Labrador in a necktie. Meanwhile, the claim backlog doubled. I was pulling 12-hour days trying to untangle the mess. And somewhere between code reviews and policy audits, I stopped sleeping. My body remembered the grind. The old exhaustion crept back in, like mold in the corners of your mind. I started getting tension headaches that wrapped around my skull like a vice. One night, while heat packing my neck and eating cereal out of a coffee mug, I questioned everything again. Was this what I fought so hard for? Was this the payoff? Stress, migraines, and Todd, and then it happened. A new file hit my queue, just a standard intake for a major surgery authorization. Routine, boring. I scanned through it half asleep, sipping lukewarm tea until my eyes locked on the name at the top, Lori Ann Wallace, my stepmother. At first I thought it was a coincidence. Wallace is common, Lori is common, but there was the address. 307 Willow Ridge Lane, my old address, my childhood home. I froze. For a second it was like I was 18 again, standing in that kitchen being told I was a freeloader in my own house. That voice in my head returned. "You think you're better than us just because you're in college. You'll be back," they always come crawling back. But I hadn't crawled. And now, 10 years later, she was the one with a claim that needed my approval. A claim that, if denied, could delay her treatment. If flagged improperly, it could cost her time. Health, comfort. I sat in silence, staring at the screen. There were 1,000 things I could have done, requested a secondary review, flagged it for audit. Found a technicality, her submission wasn't perfect, there were codes she'd missed, doctor's notes she hadn't uploaded. It wouldn't be hard, my heart thudded in my chest, not out of spite, out of power, I had it now. And I hated how good that felt. Then Maya's voice floated into my head, like she always shows up right on cue. "Let the pastel witch choke on her own karma, you don't need to serve it to her." I reread the file, took a breath, reviewed the documents, cross-checked every code. And then, I approved it, clean, fast, without a delay, not because she deserved it, but because I did. I had built a life so steady, so grounded that I could afford to be merciful. I had every reason to be petty, every right, and yet, I chose not to be her. That night I walked home feeling light, exhausted but light. Lori would never know, she'd never thank me. She'd never realize who had touched her life from behind the desk she once swore I'd never reach. But I knew, and that was enough. 3 weeks after I approved Lori's claim, I got a letter in the mail. Yes, an actual physical letter. Postmarked from Greenville, Iowa, written on stationery that smelled faintly of lavender and guilt. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Nobody sends letters anymore unless they're 84 years old or confessing to a crime. But when I opened the envelope, the handwriting hit me like a punch to the ribs. Neat, slightly slanted cursive. The way she used to sign school permission slips. The way she wrote passive-aggressive notes on the fridge. "Jenna." She didn't even try for dear. Classic. "You'll probably think I have no right to write you, and maybe I don't. I don't know if you'll read this or just tear it up. That would be fair." I was already half ready to toss it. But the next line stopped me cold. "I know you saw my name. I don't know how the world works exactly, but I know your fingerprints were on that claim." My stomach dropped. At first I thought maybe I imagined it. That someone else at the company just processed it fast. But then I saw your name on the patient portal under Reviewed By. I sat in my car for an hour after that. I couldn't breathe, not because I was angry. Because I realized you had every reason not to help me, and you did anyway. I sat down slowly on the edge of my couch. For a moment, I felt like the floor beneath me had turned to water. You're probably wondering why I even care. I don't know what kind of apology would matter to you now. Probably none. I was cruel to you. I made your life harder when I should have been helping. I see that now. You were a kid, and I treated you like a burden. And then, in a line that actually made my eyes sting, I called you a freeloader when you were carrying the weight of 3 jobs, school, and a house I barely contributed to. I see now that I was projecting all my own failures onto you. You were everything I couldn't be, and that made me angry. I leaned back, letting the letter rest on my chest, unsure if I wanted to cry or scream or call Maya, and read it out loud in my best fake Lori voice. But I kept reading. I've been sick for a while now. They don't say terminal, but they use words like manageable and chronic and quality of life. I have good days and bad days. When I saw your name, it felt like one of the good ones. Of course she didn't say thank you, not directly. That would have been too human, but buried under the awkward wording and the weirdly clinical tone was something I never thought I'd see from her. Remorse, real, ragged remorse. I expected her to die mad at me, or for me to never think of her again. But life, as it turns out, has a twisted sense of irony, and maybe a sense of timing, too. A week after the letter, I saw her name pop up again. Follow-up scans, a more serious treatment plan. This time she'd done everything right, the paperwork was perfect. The doctor's notes were thorough, I didn't have to do anything heroic. Just hit approve. But I hovered over that button for a while. I thought about that girl I used to be, broke, tired, invisible. And I thought about the woman I had become, stable, clear-eyed, with a damn good blazer and a job where I mattered. I approved it again. That night I met up with Maya for drinks. She listened to the whole story, chin in her hand, eyes narrowed like she was watching a dramatic Netflix docuseries. "Do you think she actually changed?" she asked. I shrugged, maybe a little, maybe just enough. "Would you ever respond to her?" I swirled the ice in my drink. I don't know, part of me thinks that letter was more for her than me. And what does the other part think? That it's the closest she'll ever get to asking for forgiveness. Maya raised her glass. "To growth then. To survival," I said, then after a pause, "and to not turning into our parents." She cackled so loudly the couple next to us moved tables. The twist wasn't that Lori wrote me a letter. The twist was that I didn't need it anymore. That, after all these years, she wasn't holding the weight over me. I was holding it over her. Not out of vengeance, but because she finally looked up and realized who I had become. I thought the letter would be the end of it. Closure, wrapped up in cursive and scented like a retirement home gift basket. But closure doesn't arrive with a stamp, it creeps in or doesn't. And in my case, it didn't. For weeks after Lori's letter, something unsettled buzzed in me, like a phone vibrating on a nightstand you can't find in the dark. I kept thinking, was that enough? Not the approval, not the mercy, the silence. I had said nothing in return. No reply, no confrontation, no final word. Was I strong, or just scared to open old wounds? Maya could tell. "You've got that haunted Victorian heroine energy again," she said one night as we ate Thai food on her balcony. "Like you're waiting for a ghost to tap on the window." "I don't want her to think she won," I muttered. "Won what, babe? You're literally in a job she said you'd never have, living a life she couldn't imagine. You won. You're just too tired to throw the confetti." But it wasn't about winning. It was about something messier. Guilt, maybe, for not being vindictive, or shame that I still cared, still wanted, even now, some version of a mother to show up and say, "You didn't deserve what I did to you." That was the crisis, not Lori's letter, not her illness. It was the realization that after 10 years of fighting to escape her, I'd built an entire identity out of her absence. And now that she was trying, however clumsily, to reach across that gulf, I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to forgive her. But I didn't want to be angry anymore either. Anger had been my engine, my armor, my morning coffee. If I put it down, who would I be without it? One night, I found myself standing outside 307 Willow Ridge Lane, the old house. I don't even remember deciding to drive there. I just ended up on that street, headlights off, heart loud in my chest. The porch light was on. She still kept petunias by the steps. They looked sad, tired. So did I didn't knock, didn't need to. I just stood there for a minute, breathing in the air of a place that had once been a battlefield. Then I whispered to no one, "I'm done fighting." And I left. It was the first real peace I'd felt in years. After that night in front of the old house, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt empty, but it was the good kind. The kind of empty you feel after cleaning out a closet that's haunted you for years. The junk is gone, the air smells better. There's room now, room for something new. Back at home, I did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I took the photo out. There weren't many. Just one small snapshot from a family barbecue when I was 16. My dad had his arms slung around me like I was still little. Lori stood next to him, stiff as a broom, holding a lemonade like it might bite her. I used to keep it buried in a drawer, wedged between tax folders and old apartment leases. But that night I put it on the kitchen counter. Not as forgiveness, not as nostalgia, just as truth. She was there. That happened. It was part of my story. But so was every night I stayed up finishing papers after double shifts. So was every coffee-fueled morning I dragged myself to class. So was every moment I chose not to be like her. The truth wasn't that Lori ruined me. The truth was that I survived her, and not just survived, became someone. Work didn't change overnight, but something in me did. I stood taller. I stopped saying sorry for things that weren't my fault. I finally corrected Todd firmly once and for all when he called me Jennifer again. It's Jenna. Like agenda, but I get things done. Even Maya noticed. You're scary in a good way now, she said over brunch, like you've been through fire and came out with a blowtorch. I smiled. I'd always thought closure would feel like a door slamming shut. But it didn't. It felt like a door gently swinging open, and me walking through it alone without looking back. It's strange, isn't it? The moments that define you don't always come with fireworks or music swelling in the background. Sometimes they come quietly on a Tuesday, with a lukewarm coffee and an email subject line that just reads, "Claim approved." That's how it started. And that's how I realized this story was never about revenge. Not really. Revenge would have been easy. One click, one denial, and Lori would have felt just a fraction of the helplessness I carried for years. The poetic justice of it practically wrote itself. But that's not who I've become. Not anymore. Because the thing no one tells you is that healing isn't loud. It doesn't always come with dramatic confrontations or a perfectly timed apology. Sometimes healing is quiet. It's making your bed on a Saturday morning and feeling proud of the silence. It's drinking your coffee with no one to impress and nothing to prove. It's standing at a crossroads with the chance to hurt the person who hurt you and choosing instead to put down the weight and walk away. I didn't forgive Lori to make her feel better. I did it so I could finally stop carrying her. She still sends a card now and then, usually with a Bible verse and a passive-aggressive weather update. Snowed in again, just like the time you forgot to shovel the walkway, remember? I don't respond, but I don't throw them out either. I let them sit on the shelf like echoes of a story I've already finished reading. My life now, it's not glamorous, but it's mine. A small apartment, a job I'm good at, a circle of friends who have become family, and a version of myself I fought like hell to become. If you asked that girl scrubbing dishes in the back of Luigi's 15 years ago whether she'd ever sit in an office approving claims, wearing heels that actually fit and saying, "Per my last email," with terrifying precision, she'd laugh. Or cry, or both, but she'd be proud. I took nothing and built something. And somewhere along the way I stopped being the girl someone else tried to break. I became the woman no one could.